I've actually been in the industry since I was 15 years old. So I was making money in high school. So this has been something I've just put my whole life into. I've gone through every single job category, from programming the games personally to art, music, design, then going to the dark side of management and running companies and investment. I've made games in Hollywood. So for me, the games industry never ever gets old. There's so many different ways and things to explore and to learn from that I'm nowhere near done. And now my latest thing has been learning networking. It's negotiating network deals and all of this kind of thing. I'm just learning. I can't see an end to it. I keep 30 years later, it's still interesting. That's what I love about this industry. I started around 1981, 82. There was a machine came out, the Sinclair ZX81. In America, it was called the Timex Sinclair 1000. And this thing had 1K of memory in it. That was my first device, and I was playing games on it, and I was writing games for it. And from that, I went through the various steps. I got the Commodore 64. I did a game for that. The ZX Spectrum was the follow-up to the ZX81. Amstrad, and these are all strange ones because they're European, and that's because I was working in Europe. Now, the Commodore 64 wasn't, but the Amstrad was. And so we were making games for European computers, but we were obviously watching what was going on in America. And Atari was huge, and Nintendo. We had Nintendo too, but it was really huge in the US. Sega as well. We had the Mega Drive, you had the Genesis. And so that's what sort of drew me in. I think that was probably, for me, the first real, like, let's get involved with console was the Sega Genesis. And I moved to America to start making games for that. The first game I did was the Terminator game from the movie The Terminator.
You're dead, honey.
The machine was awesome, so we learned how to do things better on it. Our engine got better, and we then did a game called Global Gladiators, and then we did Aladdin for Disney. We also did Cool Spot at one point in between. And so we were making these games on the Sega Genesis, and they were performing very well for us. So for me, that console really got me rolling. For me, there's this line between what's a console and what isn't. The Amiga to me was a computer, but that was something that, again, we made games for. Console to me always meant no keyboard. It was a simple concept. It was a little bit gray sometimes because you could get cartridges to plug into machines with keyboards. But to me, consoles are devices with no keyboards that you plug something into it, the game appears, and you play. And so from that point forward, sort of our console experience just went along the sort of predictable path as Sony came along, and as Microsoft's Xbox came along, we of course supported those as well. So the cloud is something that you hear a lot about these days, and there's really two very different concepts. The first one is the one that we all sort of understand as being the cloud. You know, I've got a picture, I want to upload it, I want to tweet, I want to, store my Dropbox account. This is all being uploaded into the cloud and stored on hard drives. So think of the normal version of the cloud as a lot of storage space, but that's not really all the cloud can be. There's another very, very big idea, which is, why not use the computers in the cloud to give you computing power that's far beyond what you would generally want to purchase for yourselves? If you think of it as, today you have unlimited storage space in the cloud, in the future you will also have unlimited computing space in the cloud. And what that means is that the software that you would love to experience will be running there, and then the video or the output from the game is delivered directly to wherever you are on whatever device you're on. So think of whatever you have in your hands right now as a window onto an unlimited amount of computing in the cloud. That's a different way of thinking of what is the cloud. And ultimately, it allows some quite shocking experiences. For example, someone could run a very state-of-the-art game on very state-of-the-art hardware and have it appear to be running on my old 6-year-old laptop. And it seems quite magical then. So that's really the two very clear definitions, and we're focused entirely on the one where video games will run from the cloud. I mean, I grew up with the arcades where you had a $10,000 machine that no one wanted to pay for this big $10,000 machine for the living room, but we wanted to experience it. So what we were actually doing is sharing the machine with others. I would pay for my time, you would pay for your time, and ultimately, we all share this incredible experience that I just can't have at home. If you think about the cloud becoming an arcade of the future, where the games are up there available to you, but you're sharing that hardware. That means you don't have to pay for all that hardware yourself. And it's something conceptually that we thought would be cool. But so as we started to go through the process, games are about the most difficult thing to do. With video games, the performance has to be really high. If we did this right and we could get games to run, then we could run anything else. You want to run anything else, it's trivial to us. We had challenges from the publishers to get the very highest end games running at 60 frames a second from the cloud. And by actually finally demonstrating that we could do that, you could then see how this would open up a myriad of other choices. When I first entered a room and Peter Molyneux was there, for example, I was like, oh my God, it's Peter Molyneux, because I play his games. But whenever you meet the people, invariably, they're actually really nice people. And the game industry, I think, is this very strange place because we share maybe too much. And a good example is the Game Developers Conference, where you'll get 15, 16, 17,000 people meeting and disclosing what they're working on before it's even out and telling you how they did it and all the decisions they made. And they're trying to help you save and don't make the same mistakes they made. And it's disclosures at a level that's just unusual for a business or for an industry. It means that if you're trying to do something in the video game industry, there's 100 people will help. You just have to reach to people and they will help you. That's what I love is you get this feeling that you can do almost anything. There's so many people willing to help at a conference, that any of the conferences that you would go to, that it's a case of more trying to get your idea of what you would like to do and then finding who are the best people to give me advice on doing that. So when I started in the video game business, it was literally one person does everything. You design the game, you do all the graphics, the programming, the music, the business development, everything. It's a one-man shop. And then what happens is you realize, my art's not so good, so maybe I need to get an artist, and then you get an artist, and then you go, well, at that time, I remember audio was just beeps. So your beeps were fine, but when the beeps had to start to sound like music, problem, I need an audio guy. And that's just the beginning of the sort of role that the industry got into, where you keep thinking of new niches that you need someone. Like I remember at one point hiring someone just because they were good at doing lips. And it's like, really, you're the lip guy? and so there are so many slots to fill, and that's why you end up with teams of hundreds of people. But then in my travels, I've gone to places like over in China, and in China, I've ended up meeting much larger teams, meaning the cost of the team is lower, and so you get many more people on your team actually working on the game. That's pretty tough for a Western team to have to compete against, many more people. And over time, that is also continued, where I've gone to places like Japan and I've seen teams sleeping under the desks, and ultimately, it's turning into an incredibly competitive business. I think the trick to it these days is to try to make sure that you have just at least a few superstars on your team. If you can get just a few superstars in key roles, they become an attractor to all the other talent that you can pull in on the team, and you can start to assemble an incredible team that can compete with any other team in the world. I have a little bit of a controversial opinion on storytelling in video games, and that is that, I'll be the first to admit my ability to tell stories is not good, so to just getting that up front. But I've also met plenty of other people who have no capability of telling a story. And that's why you see so many video games where the story is a horse riding along and a sword and, a flag getting stuck in the ground. And it's not real high quality storytelling. And what happened is I started to take storytelling or script writing classes in Hollywood, and you see the experts and how they do this at the very highest level, the people who are doing the most incredible writing. And when you study what they've done, you realize that this is not something that you just say, sure, I'll just write a story one day. There's really an incredible amount of skill and thought that goes into a very well
built story. And the game industry does luckily have some very talented writers. I wish there was more classes and things teaching the Hollywood quality storytelling to game writers so that we would become much more immersed. Examples are that a good Hollywood writer can have you in tears within about 20 minutes. Whereas, in a lot of video games, that's actually insanely rare. Our ability to control the emotions and our abilities to do that just aren't at as high a level, in my personal opinion. As I say, there are some that have broken through, and I think they're well worthy of going and making movies. So I think our industry is developing these people, but I just wish they were developing faster and a lot more games had amazing stories in them. And so that's something that I'm pretty passionate about, and I'm hoping over time more of the colleges will really put some effort into offering very, very high quality writing classes. There's two sort of thoughts on stories versus gameplay, and I've seen both sides of this thing where some people believe it's all about the gameplay, in which case I just want to get to the gameplay, please. But I've also seen, on the other hand, writers say, oh my God, if you didn't have our story, you would just have this like twitchy game. And so they kind of, in a weird way, there's a competition there. And I don't think there should be a competition. I think they both need to dovetail together. The trick, I think, is to use the gamer's time well, meaning be very respectful for their time. If you're forcing them to watch long, drawn-out cutscenes that are just quite frankly boring, have someone review that. Don't just keep forcing this stuff on the gamer, because sometimes you're watching people smoke an entire cigarette, and it's like, please, can we just get back to the gameplay? And so that's kind of what I'm hoping. We get back to a bit of a better balance. It's not too bad, but what's happening on mobile is it's going the exact opposite way, which is they're just going get straight to the game, and stories getting broken. So I'm a bit of a fan of both, so I'd like to see both getting done properly. I get asked a lot about video games, violence, all this kind of stuff, and my perspective is a little different, which is I don't think it's good for our industry if the games are not in some way very clearly marked and parents educated well on what it all means. If you went around a restaurant and asked the parents there, what does an M mean? I'm not sure how many would actually answer it correctly. I still to this day can't understand why everyone won't just agree on a number. Like just put 18, put 16, put 12. Who gets punished is our business, and so that's what worries me about ratings overall. All I can say is thank goodness there's at least people trying, but we're still not quite there yet. And the fact that we still continue to hear about violent video games and kids just means the system's still not working correctly. And I support whatever gets us to the point where these conversations stop. Something that's kind of interesting is when I first met large companies, when I would be sitting in Hollywood with top executives in Hollywood, they were usually older people that just hadn't grown up with video games. And so they had no understanding of what a video game really means to someone. And it's hard to explain because once you've moved into the sort of the generation, there's about a 30-year generation that has been able to touch video games and play them properly. And that generation, as it sort of moved into society and started to work its way up the ladders corporately, I've really noticed that difference. I've really noticed. When I started, it was like, it was Greek to them. They didn't understand why some video game guy wants to meet me. Why, right? And now it's like, of course we'd do a video game. They're calling, the company saying, will you do a video game based on our movie? You're super welcome now. I'm a big fan over time of getting to a point where the sort of games socially are not treated as a niche. Because we're from the cloud gaming space, we've had this conversation with gamers, and it's a very interesting one because some of them are super hardcore, and they're like, that there's a saying like, you'll take my gun from my dead hand. It's a bit like that with their games. You'll take my game box from my dead hand. And so that's the thing about it is I get that. I understand that because I come from that, certainly from that culture. But the twist is that if the game that was running on the cloud was the super high-end version of this game, more high-end than your local computer could run, how important would that box be to you then? And you can see them stop for a moment, because when you're super hardcore, you actually want the best, and that's usually what they're purchasing. This is the best of the best. It's the deluxe one with the map. At some point, I think there could be a moment where you could get that guy to pause for thought. Instead of it just being so obvious and clear to them, it's not so clear, because quality matters to these people probably the most. Virtual reality as a concept is something that I remember trying the very first versions, and it was a dream. It was something we always wanted in the games business, but we were just not able to achieve. We talk a lot about this idea. In the cloud gaming space, we talk about latency, the delay between one computer and another. The latency that was in VR was so significant that it made it almost you wanted to throw up. So whenever you think to yourself, we're not going to be there for a while with VR, but imagine we even get close. You know, we get to a point where the latency between the head move and the experience that you're getting inside the headset, so when you're looking around, the world is keeping up. If you get to a point, there is a moment in time where it's not perceivable anymore and they just lock, and that's what we're waiting for. So when we get to a point where you're able to not really perceive it, I think that's going to have a huge impact on gaming. And you know, to be really honest, I can't wait to play those games myself. I think my biggest hope for the game industry is that we continue to keep learning about consumers and putting them first. And as we do that, we will actually keep increasing the industry. So overall, I think there's tons of room for growth. I'm excited about the industry actually achieving that growth. And I would like to get to a point where games just are as well known as common in society as books, for example. My biggest fear for the game industry is that we don't fix some of the things that we've talked about. If we don't fix things like the rating systems, and we get to a point where games just mean violence to people, you can understand over time why that would start to happen, because you know, imagine parents, all their kids are choosing as violent games. If we get to a point where the industry is seen that way, or there's another twist, which is something else that's going on, is there's a move to digital right now. Retail is slowly shrinking, and the concern is that we would end up being that little store in the mall that no one goes to. Right? It's that little, like, scary little store down the far, I think it's down the far end around the corner. That's the game store. That would be really bad. And that's probably my biggest fear for the industry, because we want to be the store that all families and, you know, people, females, males, are just flocking into to go and buy new experiences. And that's something that, you know, it's a dangerous way, because it's kind of binary. It's going to go one way or the other. And I'd like to see growth instead of shrinkage. So where are games going to go in 20 years from now? It's a great question. I think you're going to get to a point where we're already kind of getting there now, where the television resolutions are getting to a point where we're kind of done with that. Like, do we really need more pixels? If you look at Retina displays on iPhones or MacBook Pros, and you project forward many more years, I don't know if we're going to be talking about resolution at all anymore. I think we'll have got past the barrier of glasses on 3D. I'm hoping someone has a breakthrough there that does high quality glassesless 3D, because I think 3D will really get a shot in the arm when that happens. I think we're going to start to look at more colors. I think there's a lot more colors in the world than televisions are able to display. You know, the fluorescence and the, you know, is it really metal and things like that. So I'm expecting to see the quality of colors appear. Speech recognition is very important. Speech recognition that exists today, we've talked about it for many years as being important to games. With the noise of a game playing, it's kind of hard, but speech recognition is an interesting one. There's another concept, which is speech cognition, so understanding what you said. Who cares if I can hear it, if I can't understand it? So will speech cognition be solved so whatever I do say, the computer really does get it? And then the third thing is speech generation, which means, can they speak back to me? So can that guy that I just spoke to in town respond with something that sounds like a human? And we are still, there's a lot of research to be done there, but I'm thinking that we might get the first sort of experiences where it's computer generated, that we start to think this has got potential, like the early days of stereoscopic 3D, for example. It's kind of like, this has got potential. I think this could go somewhere. CPU power, we can never get enough. So there's no end to how much power games can consume. I'm convinced of that. I think games are going to be probably the shining example of new hardware. I'm very excited to experience some of these things because what that does is whenever we get to that point where we can create new worlds that are completely immersive, then I think the game industry is going to be, we're going to start going, is it still called video games? Because I just got to my hotel room and the internet's going to be much faster in the future. So I'm going to be able to, maybe through cloud gaming, but maybe with a VR headset, step into another world. And if that other world is rendered at the quality that we will be able to do in the future, it's going to be, is that a video game or what is that? Because I'm now in the most immersive experience possible. And I don't think movies or linear stories are going to be able to keep up with us at that point.